it's Donna from the library, and welcome back to another edition of Behind the Book Book Talks. I started this program last year, right at the very beginning of the pandemic, when everybody was scrambling to find virtual programming that may work for their patron base, and I really didn't have an inclination to be on video, so I thought, oh, what can I do? I can talk about books behind the book, and that way I'm not on camera. Now I don't really worry about it so much. It is what it is. I am who I am. And I haven't been doing them for a while because the libraries are back open. We have displays. People come in. We can talk about books. But I stumbled upon this book, We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker. And I think it was one of the best books that I've read in maybe the past 5 to 10 years. And I really thought I need to share this with people and get people to put it on their to-be-read list. My very first job out of library school was in a small library, much smaller than this one, in a small town that's much smaller than this one. And I'll never forget, like the very first time I tried to make a recommendation to somebody. I have very eclectic reading tastes, and I often read books that people hate that I love. A good example of that is Frederick Bachman's Anxious People, one of my all-time favorite books. I bought many copies of it, gave it as gifts. I recommend it at the library quite often, and I haven't really run into too many people who enjoyed it as much as I enjoy it. It's one of those books I plan on reading every single year. I also have read lots of books that people absolutely love, thinks the best books ever, that I can't stand, and that would be Cutting for Stone. My mom and I share the same reading taste, and she read this and said, oh, you should take that book on your vacation. It's so good you won't be able to put it down. Reading on vacation is one of my favorite things to do. So I took this book, and it's big, and I had a week. And I thought, okay, that sounds good. I hated the book. Like all through my vacation, I cursed this book. And I got back to work. I was working at a different library then, and I said, oh my God, I can't believe I had a whole week off, and I had this for a book. And that's when I bought my Kindle, so that I would never ever be in that situation again. I could always just download another book. Back to my first job out of library school. I was working in the library. I had a dear patron. She said, what can you recommend to read? And I was reading this series, the Heart Six series by Chelsea Kane. And it's about a female serial killer. And I loved the books. She's a serial killer, she's got a bad side, but I just liked her character. And I told this patron, oh, I love this book. It's about I love this series. I love the serial killer. And she took the first one home. We don't have the whole series at this library. And she came back and said, Donna, you shouldn't tell people that you love that character. And she is pretty evil, but it was a pretty good book. And it kind of made me stop and think, maybe I should kind of temper what I say about books, because I read a lot of different things, and everybody has different taste. So back to this book. So We Begin at the End. I picked it up because I loved the title. And I thought it was going to be one of those books that begins at the end, where you open the book, it tells you how the story ends, and then you spend the rest of the book kind of going back through time to learn how you got to the end that was at the beginning. And I really liked the cover too. Never heard of Chris Whitaker, but I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I'm just going to read. I'm not going to tell you my whole take on the book, but I will tell you again, probably the best book I've read in 5 to 10 years. So on the front cover, Louise Penny, who everybody loves, wrote, this is a book to be read and reread and an author to be celebrated. And I totally agree with that. I think this is going to be one of the books that I have to own for my collection. A.J. Finn, who wrote The Woman in the Window, which I enjoyed, said, it's an instant classic. Let's begin at the end. After you've turned the final page of Chris Whitaker's magnificent new novel, you'll struggle, I struggled certainly, to describe the experience. It recalls the very best of Tana French and Dennis Lehane. Think of Duchess as a 21st century Scout Finch, tough and curious and good. In fact, think of We Begin at the End as a novel at the same time distinctly American and profoundly universal. Okay. Yep, pretty accurate. Louise Penny again said, I loved this book, from the riveting plot to the beautiful writing, but mostly what kept me longing to get back to it each day were the characters, especially young Duchess. Fierce, brave, vulnerable, she leaps off the page fully formed, as does Walk, how aptly named. a chief of police on his own inexorable journey. This is a book to be read and reread and an author to be celebrated. Again, very true. Jane Harper, who wrote The Dry and a couple other books, we have some of them here, good author, said, a beautifully written mystery packed with unforgettable characters, an intricately woven portrait of small-town intrigue where old and new sins collide. John Hart, who wrote Only Child, a couple other books, said, the most compelling young protagonist I've read in at least a decade, a deeply meaningful story that is an absolute delight from the first page to the last. And Wally Lamb, who wrote I Know This Much Is True and She's Come Undone, said, two damaged children, one timid and sweet, the other foul-mouthed and furious, will break readers' hearts in this well-plotted and perfectly paced novel. If, like me, you love stories that kidnap your intended schedule because you can't not keep turning the pages, then I wholeheartedly recommend Chris Whitaker's We Begin at the End. So that's kind of these people. And I think sometimes when you read those blurbs on the back of books and you get to the end of the book and you go, what were they talking about? How much did they pay them to say this? This book, they meant it, like every single word of it. So how would I describe this book? I would say this book ripped my heart out of my chest and put it on the ground and stomped on it. I was rooting for every single character, even every single one of them. So the book starts with the prologue. And it was like one of those TV news stories where you're missing, a child's missing, and people are walking in a line, like searching for the child. And there are 4 people at the beginning that are in this line. There's Walk, Vincent, Martha, and Star. They're all about 15 years old. You don't really know what they're looking for. They've just been instructed that if they see anything, no matter how big or small, raise their hand, and Walk raises his hand, and that's the prologue. When you start the book, it's going ahead 30 years. Walk is a cop in a small town. Vincent is just being released from prison after 30 years. You don't really know where Martha's at, and Star is a single mom with 2 children. Duchess, which is the one that everybody talks about in those little blurbs, who introduces herself as Duchess Day Radley, outlaw, and her little brother, Robin, who's 6. Duchess is 13, Robin is 6, and Duchess takes care of her brother with all of her heart and soul. Like, she will do anything for her brother. And these kids and their mom, and in fact all of the characters, have this life that's just full of turmoil and struggle and sadness, and they're just struggling to get through it all, and you just feel for them. And I'm not going to get any further into the details of the story because you just need to read it and just enjoy everything for yourself for the first time and have no idea what's going on. So again, this book is called We Begin at the End. It's by Chris Whitaker. I'm not sure. I think this is probably his first book. And it's amazingly written, and put it on your list and pick it up next time you're at the library. If it's here, it may be, you may have to put your name on hold, but We Begin at the End. And you'll find out what that means too. So that's my edition of Behind the Book Talks. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you read the book. And I'll try to get back into doing this more regularly again. We'll see how it goes. Take good care.